Hi, my name is Vanessa Hadrych, and this is my KW story.
Today we're going to be talking to Vanessa Hadrych, Director of Communities with Keller Williams Realty International. Thank you for joining us today, Vanessa.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I really want to dig into your KW story because you've got a really interesting past 5 years. And I'll tell you, as we've gone through these KW stories, the 5 year mark seems to be a trend with everybody. And we know, Gary says, you can be anywhere you want to be in 5 years. And so I want to start that journey with you. So tell us a little bit about you and your first entrance into Keller Williams and what that looked like.
Awesome. So a little bit about me. As Liz said, my name is Vanessa Hadrych, Director of Communities for Keller Williams. I've been in real estate for 19 years. It's really the only career I've ever known. I came from a real estate family, and I needed a job, and my mom got me a job at an office in the Houston area, and I just kind of worked my way from there. So 5 years ago, I decided that I wanted to move from Houston to Austin. And I knew I wanted to stay in real estate. And so I said, if I'm moving to Austin, there's only one company I want to work for, and that's Keller Williams. And a few years before that, Gary had gone on Inman's stage with Brad Inman. And that's when he rolled out and said, we're no longer a real estate company. We're a tech company. We need to own our data. We need to tell our story. Everything he vocalized was frustrations that I was feeling in the industry. And it really just kind of resonated with me. And so I went from saying, I don't know that I would ever work for that company, Keller Williams, to saying there's only one company I want to work for. So knowing that I wanted to move to Austin, I applied only to Keller Williams. I applied to teams. I applied to corporate jobs, anything I could do to get here, because I knew this is where I wanted to be. And I was fortunate enough to land a role with Wendy Papazan's team as her Director of Lead Gen and Business Development. So that is how I got to Austin and got to Keller Williams.
Fantastic. So tell us about that role. What year was that? And what did you do in that role on Wendy Papazan's team? What did that look like?
Sure. So that was in 2018. It was just a few weeks before Halloween. I interviewed late September, came over, looked for places, and moved all within like 2 weeks, I think it was. And in that role, it was interesting because the Director of Lead Generation was a new title at that point, and it was something that Keller Williams teams were starting to adopt. And it was sort of an amalgamation of marketing and lead generation tactics. And so it was interesting. I'd had some marketing experience in the past at other brokerages, but it wasn't something that I was passionate about. What I was passionate about was lead generation and helping agents work a pipeline and convert, leads. So in that role, I did some marketing pieces, but I also really helped agents understand their database, bring leads into the mix for them, and then help them develop plans to convert those leads.
When we look at the Director of Lead Gen now in that role, so this was 5 years ago you entered into that role, even still today, it's one of the most vastly differing roles across teams in our company. Your role had marketing, some is purely ISA work, some is database work. It's just such a diverse role, so it's good to get some perspective on what that looked like. So where was your next move? What happened after that?
Sure. So I had come from Coldwell Banker. I had spent 10 years of my career with Coldwell Banker. I worked in their relocation department. I worked in an office. I worked on a team. And so I had a rich history with them. And there was an opportunity that came up, and they recruited me back to be the equivalent of a team leader, what we know as a team leader in Keller Williams, for one of their branch offices here in Austin. And I thought that was like the pinnacle dream job. I remember when I started in real estate thinking that branch managers or team leaders, like that was it. If you made it there, you had made it in real estate.
I remember thinking that too. I remember when I first interviewed at KW, I was a brand new licensee, and my team leader at the time said, well, where do you want to be in 5 years? I said, well, I'm going to have your job. Horrible decision. I temporarily did that at one point. Turns out I am not a team leader.
It's probably the hardest job I've ever done
in my
Yeah.
19 years.
It's hard.
100%. Yeah. So I went there and did that. And it was amazing. I think it highlighted a lot of my weaknesses. You know, I got in that role, and then shortly thereafter, COVID hit and the real estate world shut down. And all of a sudden I had, 75 agents who didn't know where their next check was going to come from, if the state was going to let them practice real estate. And so, keeping a ship going during those early months of COVID, it was crushing. It was very, very hard.
That's tough, right? You enter this new role, all the excitement of it, you go back to the company that you had started with, it feels like home, and it turns out that the position's not the right position for you, and the market hands you a really tough 90-degree turn. So what takes place next? Where's your journey take us? And what brings you back to KW ultimately?
Sure. So, I was in that role, and I was like, the one thing I won't quit anything. I knew I wasn't happy. I knew I wasn't necessarily crushing it, but, it was fine. But I knew that wasn't where I was going to stay. And I was fortunate enough that a coworker from Wendy's team, Jen Lewis, was a team leader in Austin at this point. She had moved into a team leader role. And she called me because Gary had tasked her with starting a shared services company around the dependent model. So this would have been a company that did transaction management and all the services that agents, look for most. Mm-hmm. And so we went through the career visioning process. And ultimately, I went and took that opportunity to start that company, which was called Leverage Lab.
Okay, so you come back from Caldwell into Keller Williams. Thank you, Jen Lewis, for making the phone call. So now we have you in this position and we get to work with you. And you go into the shared services department. What's that look like on a day-to-day business for you? What were you doing?
Sure. That was such an exciting role, and it tapped back into the business development side of things that I really, really loved. I love creating. I love seeing a problem and building a solution. And that was what I got to do. I mean, we built a transaction management program from the ground up. We built a program that offered hiring services. We did listing management. There was a suite of services that we built from scratch. And it was just so cool to have my DNA in all of that and see agents in the Austin area really embrace it.
It's interesting when you look at your journey. So you spent 10 years in real estate before you even came to KW. You moved to Austin and said, that's it, I'm going Keller. That's the only option for me. So you were in the day-to-day real estate world. Then you come in for the director of lead gen role. You step into that branch manager position outside of the Keller ecosystem. And then you come back in something completely different that is solving the problem of the day-to-day issues and the leverage pain points of some of our agents, right? Like of 60 to 70% of the agents in the industry. So you had three very diverse paths once you started with Keller. What fueled you in those the most, right? You said you love to create and to solve those problems. Out of those, what did you learn about yourself and what fueled you the most?
I learned that I can solve anything. I learned that when you have the right team of people around you, there isn't anything you can't do. I learned that I have resolve and grit in ways that I didn't necessarily, realize. And I also learned what it means to fail forward and to fail forward really fast. Building those pieces, not all of them were home runs, right? And you have to take a step back and go back to the drawing board, or you get feedback from an agent and something broke in the process and they experienced pain. And so it was just constant. And I think because it was something that I built, it was so personal also that it was you can't have ego in it. This is just a product and a service, and it has to be flawless for the people that you built it for. And so I learned to really remove ego from failure.
I like that. Removing the ego from failure. Gary was on one of his sessions probably in the last year, and someone was having a bad day talking about failure, and someone else said, well, I just do my best not to fail. We were on a Zoom session, and he said, if you're not failing, I feel bad for you, because that means you're not moving forward. And I think it was such a pointed statement of fail fast, and then fail forward, right? You've got to get up and keep going forward, because that's how we learn to correct things. So what happens next? So you've got this leverage system that you've been tasked with building. You've learned a lot about yourself in the process and where you thrive and what you like to dig your hands into. What's your next step?
Sure. So, we had some success in the Austin market, and we were kind of to the point where we were wondering, like, okay, are we going to take this regional? Do we scale this further? And that would have required, some additional investment, time, resources, money, all of it. And around that time, Gary had partnered with another transaction management company that he viewed as being the national solution that could come into KWRI, and then they could plug and play throughout the ecosystem. And so at that time, I started talking to Sajik Patel about an opportunity in communities, which was a newer endeavor that Keller Williams was rolling out. And over the next couple months, we had great conversations, went through the CV process again, and ultimately landed in the role that I'm in now as Director of Communities. And that was in January of 2022.
Okay, so just over a year ago at this point, you step into that role. What has Communities become, and what's your role look like since then, right? So that's a big step. You go from this shared services company in development to, we're going to do this thing called Communities, and we're going to do it big. Here you go. Build it, right? So what's your world look like now, almost 18 months into this role?
I think it's changed so much, even just in the last 18 months. So, when I started, Sajid was the VP of Communities and Learning. So Sajid was actually doing the work that I do today in this role. And it all happened just so fast that it's kind of a blur. So like the day-to-day today, 18 months into this role, looks wildly different than when we started Communities. Very quickly, I think we realized that there was a lot of interest in Communities, and it was something that a lot of people were really seeking. We have a huge ecosystem. We have 170,000 plus agents, and people were looking for niches that they could dial into to feel closeness in this larger ecosystem. So Communities are all about learning, education, networking. It's all about saying, okay, so you're part of the biggest real estate company in the world, and you really want to focus on this specific area of business to go further faster. And so you can plug into a community and get the education, the training, the networking necessary to become a professional in that space. So my day-to-day is all about helping to ensure we're delivering value. We have incredible community leaders. They're the ones who cast the vision. They're the experts in the space that they lead. And so my job is just to ensure they succeed at a really high level. I also am always looking for new communities. We know that there's a need for these in our ecosystem, and being the place where entrepreneurs thrive, there's a really good opportunity for someone to come in and say, I've built my business around this one thing, and I think we could launch a community around it because others could benefit as well.
I love that. Now, let's get to the moral of the story, right? I always ask everybody if there's one takeaway you want the people who watch this video to know about you or to learn from this 15 minutes, what would that thing be for you? What's the mic drop you want to leave with people?
It's a good question. I think it's that real estate is whatever you make it. Of the 19 years I've been in real estate, I've only sold real estate for 3 of those years. I've been really fortunate to explore a lot of different spaces and places. And the role that I'm in now is really cool. It feels like I've come full circle. I sold luxury, I sold farm and ranch. This is like, now I get to work to improve these programs for these people, these agents that we support. And so everything I've done kind of feeds into it. And so I think it's that real estate is an incredible industry. If you are in one role in real estate and it isn't the right fit, you aren't crushing it, you don't wake up every day excited, doesn't mean that you need to leave real estate. You just need to align your passions with what the industry needs. There's space for everyone.
I think that's such a huge point. So many people look at it and say, well, I'm not suited for this. Well, there's such a massive dynamic of what plugs into real estate that it's not just, I love to sell houses and people are my favorite. It's a really vast ecosystem. All right, well, we'll wrap it with the last one. What's one random fact people probably don't know about Vanessa Hadrych?
So I think some people do know about it now. For some reason, whenever I log into like a Google's a Google Meet, if we don't have a Zoom, it always links to my personal email, which is Death Metal Falconry.
I was subject to that. I was like, who is in our Google Doc?
Yep. So I'm working to be an apprentice falconer, and I also really love heavy metal music. So my side job, once I get settled into my house that I just bought, is to build my bird house, which is called the Muse, get my bird, and start my YouTube channel back up so people can learn all about falconry.
Death Metal Falconry. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Vanessa, I thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fantastic interview, and I love seeing your journey through the color ecosystem that lands you at KWRI, right? We start in real estate, and yet we end up in this massive ecosystem that is the largest real estate company in the world. So thank you so much. I can't wait to see your video up, and we'll talk to you soon.
No worries. Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Going back to the one takeaway, I would say bet on yourself. And if you would have said 19 years ago, I'll be in this position, or you would have even said 5 years ago, I'll be in this position, I would have laughed. You know, I literally thought the best that I could aspire to be a real estate assistant. That's what my mom did for her whole career. And the fact that I am where I am now, I doubted myself most steps of the way. Bet on yourself. You know, you have what it takes.
You can be anywhere you want to be in 5 years, and we highly overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 and underestimate what we can accomplish in 5. I love it. Thank you so much.